Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of The Business of YouTube. Today, we have as a guest Sébastien Audoux, also known as the double agent of digital. It's a good punchline to start with, right? He's going to explain a bit more, but there's a very funny story about that. He's the double agent between traditional media and digital media. So, welcome to the podcast, Sébastien.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, and I'm indeed a double agent.
Double
Um,
agent. What's the story of the double agent? Let's start from there.
well, I'd say most people that work on the digital side or streaming side or social media usually started with this. That was their whole career. And the people that work on the broadcast side usually spend their whole career working on the broadcast side. And I made the weird choice, maybe, to, after about like 15 years on the broadcast side, including, being a sports announcer and host, decided to somehow try and handle the difficult task of building or rebuilding the entire social media output and trying to bring a new sports experience for the user of the Canal Plus app when I was at Canal Plus. And the reason you can call me a double agent is that really I had the feeling that, in my opinion, it was basically the same job. It was just a different means of distribution. And of course, you had to tailor to the platform that you were being distributed on. But outside of that, it was, we were in the
Business as
business of
usual.
content. Exactly. But I can tell you internally, people didn't feel that way.
Which year
And,
was that? Like what kind of
I started because,
thing?
I spent actually a year and a half doing, keeping my head of golf job. So I was running the dedicated golf channel at Canal Plus. And then I started running digital in 2015. And so I did that for about a year and a half. And then at that time, I was basically running digital from the broadcast side. And then they asked me to switch to the digital division. And to me, I was like, well, I mean, what's the difference? I used to be the head of digital on the sports side, and now I'm going to be the head of sports on the digital side. Doesn't make much difference. I can tell you everything was very different from that point on, because there was really a competition between the this digital division and the traditional linear division. And honestly, it's not a thing with my former company. It's a thing in every big company, every big pay TV operator, every big traditional broadcasting company. They're all going through the same type of hurdles, I would say, where it's really hard to have everybody on the same page, because obviously the linear side try to protect what they have, and the digital side is trying to build something new, and there are going to be tension between the two sides of the company, of course.
Yeah, I think it's normal to have tension because we're talking about theoretically competing business lines, but in reality, as you said, at the end they converge into the content industries. Like it's about content and audience, no matter what, and so it's just different way to approach the audience. At the end of the day, it's not one against the other. It's like, how do you get the audience wherever they want to be? So, but
Exactly.
it's very funny that I remember that you were posting about this the double agent, and stuck with me. Like I think it was really 2 years ago or something. But that post was, it just explained the feeling of like whoever was in one side or the other. And I was on the digital side, and so I could feel that from like the traditional side.
Yeah, I mean,
So
it's to me that's really the wrong approach, but obviously it's I can understand that people feel threatened by those new ways of consuming content, those new platform. Sometimes the threat that is perceived from those platforms, but in my opinion, you can't beat the future. You have to try and tackle those new challenges. And I've written a lot about highly disruptive environment that we are in particular in the sports media side of things. And I must say, I'm enjoying it tremendously. I'm having fun in this highly disrupted environment. I felt it was much more boring 15 years ago when nothing was really happening, and pay TV was the main way of consuming sports content.
Well, you've seen, like, let's set the scene though now, like a bit of your story. So, because this is like a very point in time in which everything was going to change. But can you tell us a bit more about your story? So, where you're coming from and what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so basically, my background is editorial. I started as a journalist, did a lot of commentary on many different sports for years, and I did a lot of NBA. I was part of the team that basically launched the first dedicated NBA channel in France called NBA Plus. And then when Canal Plus got back the rights for the PGA Tour, I became the main PGA Tour announcer, mostly because, let's not kid ourselves, it was a huge upgrade from going home at 7 o'clock in the morning. Suddenly I was able to go home by like 2 o'clock in the morning. So
Okay,
huge
yeah,
upgrade for for my
a
sleep
few
at
more
least.
hours.
So I'd spent about a decade, doing that, traveling to all the majors, traveling to the Ryder Cup, and so on. I had a lot of fun doing that. At some point, they kindly asked me to lead all the golf operation. We had a dedicated golf channel, and quickly thereafter, they felt, because I was always pushing, why don't we do more on at that time, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, even though YouTube at Canal Plus was a bit complex because Canal Plus also owned Dailymotion. And but Yeah, so I was always pushing for that when I was on the traditional sports department, and at some point they told me, okay, well, I mean, you've been asking for us to do more over and over again. Now
No,
this is your
thank you.
time. Now do
Now
it.
that's your problem.
Now do it. So I did that until 2023. At that time, I felt, because I was never really a big believer in having a huge digital department. To me, it was really supposed to be a temporary transition where you kind of explain everybody what is the new world, and then your job is done. And so, at that time, I chose to leave. And since then, I've been mostly on the tech side, sports tech side, advising a lot of startups, which has been a lot of fun. I recommend that to every top executives in the business. At some point, you need to become an independent. Huge jump. You're leaving the comfort of having being part of the big company with all the perks that are part of this, and suddenly you become an independent. And even I was about to say, even worse, then you try working with startups where basically everybody. One founder once told me, when I wake up in the morning, I don't know if I'm going to lose my house or become a billionaire. And that's the exact feeling I probably got every day working with so many different startups, because you're absolutely ecstatic because you're pushing those great new ideas, those great new innovation, and then the funding round doesn't happen like you expect it to happen, and then suddenly you're like, should we stop? Yesterday you were thinking about, I don't know, you know, renting a huge space for your HQ, and the next day you're like, yeah, should we continue or what? So great learning curve, and again, I definitely recommend that at some point in your career. It's a good way of being kicked in the ass, and
It's a good executive MBA. Let's put it this way.
exactly. That's a good way of putting it. That's my own. That's my own executive MBA, in a very disruptive way. Yeah, absolutely.
And like you've been in the business in one way or another for long, especially on the sports slash broadcast slash platform. Lots of slashes there. Where do you see we are in terms of maturity of the industry for sports and platforms? Because what I see is that definitely something is moving. But from your point of view, which is like you have a very good view on what's going on, where do you see the sport industry? Is this a mature market or not really on in terms of platforms leveraging that
Um,
for business?
yeah, in a way, it's mature because obviously, most of the big leagues are those long-term big media rights contracts, and they are all quite big on all the more main social media platform. They are all they mostly in most cases they have their own streaming platform as well, direct to consumer. They are also using a lot of the new streaming platform built by their broadcast partner and so on. So in that regard, it's mature. But in my opinion, it's not mature at all if you're looking at the future, meaning that the new way to consume sports, because most of the value in sports media today still comes from the live only in most cases. And the issue is that what will be the live consumption by younger demographics? I have a son who's a huge basketball fan. I'm consider myself a huge basketball fan. I would not say that he's less interested in basketball than myself, not by any means, but he's definitely less interested in live basketball than I am, for sure, because he never watched any game at all. Even the NBA Christmas Day when the games are a good time on in Europe, not interested. He's gonna watch the highlights on TikTok the next day. That's his thing. So I think that's highly disruptive. And from my sport, another thing that has been highly disruptive is the fact that we've seen, and I found this trend absolutely mind-boggling and so interesting, is that we've seen the birth and the incredible growth of YouTube golf, where suddenly you had YouTube content creator that became huge. You know, Obviously we have to talk about a guy like Grant Horvat who is doing millions of views, and then you had people in most cases pro player from the Live Golf Tour, Bryson DeChambeau and Phil Mickelson, that started doing YouTube as well, did millions of views, and that is also highly disruptive as well because nothing in traditional golf come close to the type of views those guys are having. And you can feel like, okay, so basically those guys are having more views on YouTube than any of the professional players, except maybe for Bryson DeChambeau, who's been doing so
With
good on YouTube.
exactly.
This is
He's doing
basically
everywhere, good everywhere.
he was highly popular, and he decided to play the game the right way in terms of playing the YouTube game. And he decided he didn't do traditional content and put it on YouTube. He did the type of stuff that the content creator were doing on YouTube. And suddenly, when you are one of the most popular professional player on earth, then you're gonna get a lot of views for sure. And so I think it was really smart. But it's
Yes, but
obviously
that's because he did it as well in the right way. Because I've seen a lot of celebrities doing it and just
not right.
pretending the name is going to work. The name gets you just up to a certain point, but then if the content doesn't work, it doesn't work. So you need to do it the right way to actually engage with the audience, and that's what he did. It's like I have a credibility, I have the skills, I'm a professional player, but I play the game in a way that works on the platform.
Yeah,
Which
yeah, you're absolutely right. And to me, that's the absolute key with this is that you can't play 80% of the YouTube game or 70%. And usually that's the issue with big sports organization, big rights owner, or even big sports media companies, is that when they go on YouTube, they only want to play the game up to a certain point. And it doesn't work like it. Either you go at it 100% and you commit to it, the type of content that works on YouTube, or it's not going. It can perform somewhat well. I mean, you're the expert in that segment, obviously, but you're never going to get what you could have gotten if you had played the game the proper way. One good example of that, obviously, I'm a huge PGA Tour supporter. I'm the biggest ambassador of the PGA Tour in Europe, probably. And people in the golf industry are always making fun of me because of that, because I'm like, it's like I'm waving the flag of the PGA Tour everywhere I go. And I think they were
Where's the
smart.
flag? You should have the flag in the back.
No, I don't have it yet, but
Come on.
and I was it's super smart that they decided to bring all those content creators and basically allow them to play just before big tournaments like the Players Championship, and I think they did that at the Tour Championship as well. Super smart. The only thing I would say is that then go even a step further, and instead of maybe doing it live on your own account, maybe start doing it like it would be done in any collaboration on YouTube between two content creators, where they publish the first part of that, and then you publish the second part for every one of them. And I think it would have performed a bit better, and it would have cost much less money. But again, it's still very, very progressive that they decided to allow those people to come at a huge tournament and basically play a tournament before the tournament. Because I can probably have a feeling that not every professional golf player was really happy about that, because it's like, okay, well, those guys now these days are being treated like we are, and they come to our tournament. Those guys are nobodies. I mean, we are the professional players. So I think that was smart, but maybe you could have gone even a step further in terms of playing the YouTube game the right way. Maybe they will do that in the future.
And from your opinion, what the fact that the example you were making about golf, that you love golf or NBA as well, like, and your son watches the NBA, but just in a different way, so that you watch the live game at whatever time in the day or the night. He doesn't, but he does watch YouTube or like other platform content anyway, like NBA content. And do you see that as a threat or opportunity, and how do you think it should be tackled then?
Well, to me, YouTube is a huge opportunity. I've been saying it for years. To me, it's the new free tour. If I look at my family, I have two teenagers. My wife is not much interested in sports. I'm absolutely, obviously, hugely interested in sports.
Well, well, at least you average in the two of you. Otherwise, it was really complicated, just the sports guys.
But the only way, I won't lie, I'm not allowed on TikTok. I'm not allowed on Snap. I have to push myself to publish a few stuff on Instagram to remind people that I used to lead digital and social media, so I need to be active on those platforms. The only platform that is being used by the entire family is YouTube, exactly like free to air television 30 years ago, where when I was a kid, I was watching TV a lot. My parents were watching TV a lot. My grandparents were watching TV a lot. We were not watching the same thing, but we were all on this same platform, which is why TV was so powerful. And today, that is YouTube for me. I have absolutely every subscription to every streaming platform in France that you can think of. I carry all those subscriptions. But even with all those subscription, I spend more time on YouTube, including most of my time on YouTube is on my television. And so, yeah, I do think it's a huge opportunity, including for some sports. I do think that some sports are really well equipped to be consumed as highlights. For example, I have a T-shirt of the NFL. I love the NFL. I think I probably watch, like, I don't know, 2 or 3 live games a year, but I watch almost every game on YouTube. I watch the highlights. And to me, that's the way to consume the NFL content. I don't feel the need to, well, first of all, it's sometimes late, but I could watch the red zone, and sometimes I watch the red zone a bit because it starts at a good time in Europe. But it's good for an hour. I don't even want to wait till the end of the games. But then I like to watch the highlights on YouTube, because I think this sport, it's such a succession of short actions that it's really perfect as highlight thing. Traditional football, European football, is less tailored for that type of consumption, in my opinion. So I think there will be probably a gap between the sports that are easily that are even almost better as highlights compared to sports where, I mean, in traditional or in European football, the waiting for a goal is almost the pleasure that you're getting watching a football game. Is you're waiting for that goal because you're not going to have many goals in
Yeah, it's
basketball.
99% of the time you're just waiting for the goal, because
Exactly,
even if
and
it's a lot of
that's the thing,
goals,
and
it's
that's why we all watch football, and that's why the World Cup is so good, because when suddenly it's win or go home, it's nothing is as powerful as that. But at the same time, you're waiting for that goal, and in highlights the day after, it doesn't work. Same thing for me with Formula One, for example. I don't watch a lot of highlights with Formula One, even when it's at weird, um, uh, even when it's super early in the morning, like in Asia or something. I usually watch the entire replay as live because, again, it's the same thing. You're expecting, yeah, something wrong might happen. I mean, maybe that guy will have, maybe the engine will break down, maybe they will miss the pit stop. But I think golf, basketball, American football, other types of sports are really super well equipped for a YouTube highlights. And so I think, yeah, I mean, that's a super long answer. I'm sorry for
well, it's a
for your
podcast. We have
for your
time. Don't worry.
question, but yeah, I think it's a tremendous opportunity. And again, not a competition. I remember when I first started working on digital and I wanted to put highlights on YouTube or even other social media platforms, people were coming back to me with like, okay, well, you're going to kill our subscription if you put stuff for free on that time Facebook and YouTube. People are not going to subscribe. And I was like, yeah, no, I really don't think so. And actually, I do think that it's going to really help our main business if we start doing it. So no, not definitely not a threat. Uh, a somewhat disruptive thing for sure, but again, the sports media market is going to be heavily disrupted anyway, whether you like it or not. So yeah, definitely a huge opportunity in my opinion, because well, I mean, everybody talks about Netflix, but again, you have the numbers, but I think the biggest streaming platform on the planet is actually YouTube, not Netflix.
It's 2x actually the size. And with the time consumed, which is crazy. Like if you think about it, on TV, which you expect premium content, which still premium content will always win in a way. It has its own market and will always have the market. But then the scale of the content that gets to any kind of person that wants to watch whatever kind of content, then that's the only place is YouTube at the end of the day. And once they get the TV, which they did, and that's it's all downhill from there in terms of like that was the whole strategy, to be honest, get into the TV and be easy for consumption. And people actually, to go into back to your point, now YouTube is on TV, period. But the big change is that every demographic now watches it on TV, which is like the most important thing for like actually accessing all the content that is available. So you can really watch from a documentary about animals to whatever sports you can think of from whatever part of the world on a big screen, which is the best consumption ever in terms of like quality of consumption of the content. And that's it's more options, not less options. And to your point, to be honest though, I think that the fact that now different generations are using platforms like YouTube, they watch content that is live and non-live. I think from my point of view, the biggest opportunity is actually the non-live content, and it goes even beyond the highlights. It's like that means that you have the rights for the live, the rights for the highlights, and then you can actually come up with different type of rights that didn't exist before. It's like they just didn't. Even highlights rights didn't exist before the highlights. It was like just live. And so for me, the opportunity is actually thinking about that content and goes to new audiences and new rights and new opportunities to grow, where life is limited. No matter what, you can have 1 day a week or 2 days a week of football or whatever sport, but you can't have it every day because it's just not how it works.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right, and I think that's tremendously important. I remember a top executive that I had to deal with, not in a bad way, early in my career, but he was not coming from sports. And when he came in to run the sports channel I was working with at that time, he was like, to me, that's the thing is that when I'm buying a documentary, I can re-air it for like the next 10 years. Live sports, basically, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then it's done. And then it
It's
has
that.
no value. That's a huge issue for me. And I was like, yeah, he actually has a point. That's a huge issue with sports. And even when now we've started seeing like big rights owner trying to use their vault, their archives, which have a lot of value. But again, if you like, I've seen golf rights owners do that. Well, they're like, okay, we're going to publish the last 5 hours of the last round of that tournament from 20 years ago. It's easy. You take the file. Sometimes you have to maybe digitalize an old tape. And then you do that. And then you publish the file on YouTube. And then that's it. We're done. If we get a few views, then that's, it was sitting somewhere. Now it's on YouTube. So we're better for it. No. If you do like an oral history, if you put some context for that archive, if you build a documentary that doesn't have to be Last Dance type of documentary, super high production. You could do something, much more simple, but that will definitely perform much better. Obviously, it would be shorter. You would insist on the top um, um, stories. And actually, when you look at when ESPN basically rebuilt sports documentary when they launched ESPN 30 for 30, if you look at probably like, I don't know, 80% of those documentaries are basically based on old events happening and basically retelling the stories of those events that people might have not heard of or might have seen at that time, and they want to go back in time to relive that in another way. It's super powerful as long as you make an effort, and storytelling is obviously key. And yeah, I do believe that people see the non-live element as being disruptive at the moment, but actually there's a huge opportunity to create new monetization model on top of sports that are probably much more resilient. Because again, the good thing about Drive to Survive, but nobody talks about, two elements to me that are key, is that first of all, it got us interested in the race for like the 7th place, 10th place, 12th place. Suddenly you are like, okay, well, I mean, those guys that are basically racing for nothing, because after the 10th place, you don't even win points. But suddenly with Drive to Survive, it made that appealing. And the other thing is that even following a football club, even if the season doesn't go well, you can have a story no matter what. And it's that is really powerful, because in sports the monetization is really tied down to the sports outcome. And it always has been. When a big free-to-air broadcaster in France is acquiring the World Cup, they are basically betting on the French
Yeah,
team
getting to the
going
end.
at least to the final, because the whole plan is to make money out of it, is that France will go all the way. Actually, I do think that in this environment, with new storytellings, new ways of approaching those big events, new ways of again telling the stories of those events, it's an opportunity to maybe, instead of making a bet, having a more reassuring outcome in terms of monetization.
Yeah, it's de-risking in a way because anyway, like in all sports, like most of the teams are gonna lose in a way. Like there's one winner, so
Exactly.
by default, everybody else is losing. So I was actually having this conversation with the owner of one team, and he was like, "Look, I'm going to lose. That's a fact. If I win, that's exception. So I need to build the business around losing so that then when I win, actually, I make more money out of it. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense from a
Yeah.
business perspective, to be honest, because then you need to just think it differently. Of course, you are there to win, and there's no doubt everybody's there to win. Nobody's there to lose, but building the business around it so that actually it works very well when you lose and extremely well when you win, then it's like bulletproofing the business. And then actually thinking about different revenue streams and leveraging whatever assets you have in different capacities. Of course, this is not the only thing that you can do, but it's new things that you can do with whatever you have, and that's just new revenue streams that are there sitting, getting dust, basically. And archives, I do agree. I'm a big believer in archives, and archives have many different lives in whatever capacity you can use them. And that is for any sport because it's both for, as you said, for new generations and for the nostalgia for the like the who watched that whatever car takeover from Formula One or like goal from whoever was the player at the time or whatever. But and that is that there's a massive interest in that from the audience. The audience wants that, and if you see the
Including younger
numbers,
demographics,
absolutely,
which is
absolutely.
super interesting. My kid, he wants to know about Jordan all the time. So we would be able to watch more stuff about Jordan if there were more different storytelling around Jordan era, for example. But it's just not available, which is a huge mistake in a way. Obviously, it's very complex because Jordan has a specific deal, so he owns part of the thing, and the NBA cannot do anything without Jordan. Again, a bit complex, but forgetting that for a minute, you can tell stories about Jordan for the next century, probably on every platform
Oh
possible
yeah, yeah, yeah.
in so many different ways. It's just not being done, and
Yeah,
they're leaving a
and
lot of money on
without,
the table.
yeah, exactly, and without having any new shooting whatsoever, like
Exactly.
zero.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. And again, the thing is that putting more context in an event can really bring again a new element where suddenly, if you had done the Last Dance in after that season 98, like let's say you had done that in 99, it wouldn't have been as good as it was doing it like 20 years later. And I think in many cases it brings, obviously, after a while, people can speak more freely about what happened at that time. So again, such a huge opportunity with archives, and again, such a huge opportunity for being less dependent on the sports outcome, and which is something that, as you said, every sports organization has to be looking at it that way. And this is something I remember listening to Chad Mum, the creator of Full Swing on Netflix, saying that he couldn't really make a story of somebody finishing tight six in his series. And I don't believe that, actually. I think you might have a really good story with somebody finishing tight six. And we've seen that, for example, with the series around receivers and quarterback done by NFL Film, also on Netflix, where some are gonna go. Obviously, the first season of quarterback, you had Mahomes who went all the way and won the Super Bowl. The next season, nobody won anything, and it was not. It was as good as the first season. As long as the storytelling can live without the positive sports outcome. And actually, as somebody who's done, hundreds of interviews of athletes after the a round of golf, after a basketball game, I can tell you that the ones who had lost were much more interesting than the ones who had won. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, there's a
the
lot of
guy,
story
the,
there. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, the guy
I'm
who's
an emotional
disappointed was
person.
always a better interview. The guy who has won is like, yeah, okay, well, I just won. I'm super ecstatic. Yeah, it's so cool. I won. And that's it.
Just
The
leave me
guy who
alone. I
lost,
just want to party.
yeah, but usually, I mean, obviously, many don't want to talk in that when that happens. But the ones who do, I mean, I've seen like on TV. There was the second division, the Corn Ferry Tour final last week, and the guy missed on his PGA Tour card for the next year by like I don't know really small amount. Like he missed one putt and that changed the outcome. And that's, I mean, for that guy, that's a huge difference. Instead of making millions next year on the PGA Tour, he's going to be making, a few thousand on the Corn Ferry Tour. So it's really a different life. But the guy went on TV and talked about that. One of the best interviews in golf I've seen this year, for sure, by far.
But
And
that
that's
gives
the
you lots of
power.
storytelling. Yeah,
Exactly. And again, sometimes we forget that. I think we are in the same tunnel as we always are in sports, where it's about winning, it's about, the guy who wins, the team who wins. And the storytelling is usually very straightforward, where it's a live game, replay of the live game, and then a few years later publishing the archive of the live game. No. If you go a bit deeper than that, you're really gonna stumble upon a really a gold mine of content and storytelling. But you have
yeah,
to make an effort.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. You need to see it that way first of all, and then just act in that way. So, yeah, absolutely. And speaking of YouTube, of course, like we already spoke about different examples, but as a platform, what do you think the platform should do better?
I'd say we are reaching a point where I've seen it's not going to be a sports example, but I'm watching a lot of people do content around music as well on YouTube, and obviously there's this huge example of Rick Beato being threatened by some record company. And I think probably this is one thing I know there, because I know obviously all the background, and I know YouTube teams are already, trying to help the big content creator. But to me, it's not so much about how big you are. I think YouTube is reaching a point of being, again, like the new free to air television, where they need to think also where, I mean, a guy like Rick Beato is really the most premium type of musical content you can think of. It helps not only the music industry as a whole. I think it helps obviously YouTube. It helps. I think it inspires people to do more premium content as well around music, and it can't be treated the same way as Let's say tomorrow I start doing like reaction of albums on YouTube, and I start talking about that, and suddenly one record label decide to strike me because I'm using their music. It needs to be a bit different, and I think they need to be really supportive of all those. Again, it's not being just big; it's the quality you're bringing. Because again, especially when you're thinking about older demographics, people watching YouTube on TVs and so on, they're gonna I know they probably hate me saying that, but it's they're gonna have to handle themselves much more as a media, even though they keep saying they are not. But in a way, they are becoming bigger than any media, and I think it's a slight shift that they're gonna have to think to start thinking of. I don't know,
Slight.
yeah. Because now suddenly it's all about it's not just about the millions of views, it's also about the type of content you're doing, the production quality that you have behind it, and so on. And you can't really it's not apple and apple, actually it's apple and oranges, and you need to see that, and you need to, and obviously content on YouTube, it's somewhat complex for many different reasons, and there's a huge complexity, and again you there's gonna have to be more probably arbitration between the different stakeholders, and it can't be really like okay Coral like it was at the beginning, which I was all for it. And I think some rights owners were really smart at that time, like the NBA, which basically said, we don't care, put NBA content on YouTube. Everybody's sending their lawyers. We are just going to count the millions of views. It's going to help our business. And it did. But now it's a different era. And again, different era mean that you probably need to approach a few things a bit differently from the beginning.
And now, very last question, which is my favorite of all times, is what are you most proud of?
I'm really proud of having crossed the bridge of Spy, defecting from East Germany to West Germany, or because it's obviously when I'm saying that, I say, okay, so broadcast is East Germany and digital is West Germany. Yeah, probably in a way.
Yeah, you leave it
Uh,
open, like people could define what is East and West.
I'm super proud of that, and having been lead through the past 2 years, the startup roller coaster ride. I've worked for about a year for a startup in the UK where we had such a great project, and in the end we had a huge investor. In the end, did it come through? We had to close the company. It was such a heartbreak, but at the same time, I learned so much. I met great people, and the experience I got from that 1 year is probably more useful than the 25 years before that. And so I'm kind of proud of that as well.
Cool. That's I know what you mean. I did a lot of MBAs
I
in the
guess.
last few years.
I
But
guess
as
so.
far as I keep learning, that's I think that what keeps me interested. Of course, like I love anything YouTube, media, like sports, whatever is moving, like really in terms of this space. But the key thing is really everything is kind of written while you go. So you need to know the basics, but then you need to just make sure you keep learning, you keep moving, you never stand still, and that's what I really enjoy on the startup scene, and that's what keeps me alive. As far as I learn, brilliant. I'm here for it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's the key element, and that's a lesson for the entire sports industry and the sports media industry in particular, which tends to be quite conservative in the way they think. Well, it's all about we don't want to move. We're doing well, people. We don't want to move, and if we have to move, we'll wait till we are,
We have to when we
yeah,
really,
exactly.
really.
When we really have to move, then we will move. I think it's this innovative startup attitude needs to be more present in the sports world for sure, because it would help the industry tremendously. Obviously, we're biased, but that's okay.
Well, we definitely are, but I think it's a good exchange is good for both sides. I think that
Exactly.
startups need to realize that the real world goes at a different pace and deal with it. I think that's definitely a big lesson for everyone in the startup world, me included. I mean, I learned that. Everybody does learn that in a hard way, and like you think that everything is going to be very like tomorrow, and that's going to take 15 years, but that's a different story. And you just need to go with the pace. It's like you're always either too early or too late. Chances are, like, if you want to get at the right time, you need to just be there, first of all, alive, which is not that easy sometimes in the startup. But if you're there alive at the right time, then bingo. But that right time is very hard to predict. It's really, really, really hard. It's like, I think
Exactly.
it's the most hard part. But as well, like, I think it's interesting to see that on the other side, on traditional industries, is like learning from like trial and error, because then like technology is trial and error, just doing things differently and see what sticks, what doesn't, and just really see new opportunities. I agree, it's like learning from the two worlds, and it's the best of both that actually is going to win at the end of the day.
Exactly. Yeah. Well said.
All right. Thank you, Sebastian. So I'm very glad
My
I had
pleasure.
to interview now that as well. Like there was these funny moments that I was you for like a tiny period of time,
Oh,
like
that's right.
a couple of seconds on a
Thanks
video
to
from
Carlo.
thank you to Carlo De Marquez, like a guy with a scarf made me become Sébastien Audoux for a minute, and I was like, you know what, I need to interview Sébastien Audoux, so that's time. Thank you, Carlo.
Thanks,
And
Carlo.
thank you, Sebastian. It was very, very interesting to talk to you and listen to the whole story and your point of view on the industry. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for watching. And see you to the next episode of The Business of YouTube. Thank you and goodbye.